So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to warn the church. Right now, there is a re-emergence of Christianity amongst those who are, how shall we say, politically right-wing or conservative. That is a good thing. And we should be evangelizing to the political right. But, ladies and gentlemen, there are, as there always are on the political right, ethno-nationalists and racists who are trying to co-opt Christianity for their racism. They are trying to talk about, Western nations that are just white, that they are white nations. This kind of politics is being dressed up with a thin veneer of Christianity. And the reason why the racists are doing that is because they, like everyone else, knows that right now Christianity has become fashionable on the political right. And so they're trying to abuse our noble faith for their ethnic ideology. We must be on the guard for such people. We must be willing to oppose such people. Because anyone who tries to destroy the Catholicity of the church, the idea that the church is a covenant of people of all ethnicities and nations, of all languages and nations, and try to create some kind of nonsense that this little part of the world is for white people, whatever that means. I feel insulted when someone calls me a white person. I'm a Saxon, and I'm proud of being a Saxon. I'm not some homogeneous blob called white. Now, ladies and gentlemen, anyone who wants to divide us as Christians into white Christian nations and black Christian nations and Asian Christian nations is in error, because they are denying the Catholic nature of the church, that the church is for all peoples, a universal brotherhood, ladies and gentlemen. And so we must watch out for these racists and oppose them. Any other questions? So the question is the Catholic Church Roman? No. The Catholic Church is all Christians together. Universal. It is a universal church. Yes, thank you. If you want to answer your own questions, you don't need to ask them.
I want you
Next question, ladies and gentlemen. Next question, ladies and gentlemen. Next question going once.
I'd like to stand
No.
in front of the
No, let someone else ask a question. The only reason denominational trolls behave like this is because if he would stand over there and try and talk, no one would be listening to him. Nobody. And so what I find is whenever I draw a crowd in my talks, what happens is they jump in like this, because this is the only way they can get anyone to hear them. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, on the question? Or on any aspect of the Christian faith? Going once, going twice. Any questions? Going 3 times. No questions? Sold. Right. Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you all have a lovely day.
Hold on, Bob. Does this mean I've now missed everything? We're now live.
It's not like I haven't just given you a chance for questions. Where's your audience? There's nobody watching today.
35,000 people.
Are you telling me 35,000 people and there's not one question? Go on, brother.
Any thoughts of when the tribulation's going to start?
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, do I have any thoughts on when the tribulations are going to start? I want to say, brothers and sisters, from the outset, that if you're worried about this question, and I mean this respectfully, brother, you're worried about the wrong questions. The questions we need to be concerned about is, how do we tackle Islamization? How do we tackle liberalization? How do we tackle secularization? How do we tackle racist ideologies? How do we tackle the division in the church? How do we tackle the demographic collapse of the church? How do we tackle the big questions that our generation are facing? Jesus said, you can know the seasons by looking at the sky, but do you know the times? but you don't know the times. That is a warning for Christians to be wise. And I find that discourse around end times prophecy is often a distraction to Christians to deal with the real topics that we actually face. Whatever God has planned for the future will happen, regardless of our opinions about it. What the parables of Jesus call us to do is to be a faithful servant in our time, now, in this moment. And in this moment, we are threatened by Islamists. In this moment, we see the cancer of liberalism killing the West. In this moment, we see our children being sexualized by transgender ideology. In this moment, we see our governments mishandling the economy and taking us all over a cliff. These are the questions that we need to be dealing with. Any other questions on the topic, or any question about Christianity? So to answer your question very quickly, I don't have any strong opinions about the tribulation because my mind is filled with more present concerns. Any other questions? Go on, bro.
Just a question, what you think about the prophecy of fire? Because in the Bible, fire is representative of God quite a few times. It also mentions cleansing fire and the hellfire. There's two different types of fire. So I was wondering if you could explain a bit about fire in the Bible.
Yep. So, ladies and gentlemen, the imagery of fire is used in the Christian scriptures to describe the eternal punishment of hell, but also a purifying fire, which is the Lord's own glory. The Lord's own glory cannot exist in the presence of sin, or rather, sin cannot exist in the presence of the Lord's own glory. We are saved by the grace of God. That salvation is given to us as a gift. You did not earn it, and nothing that you do will justify you having it. But, ladies and gentlemen, now as Christians we do have it, we have an obligation to build upon it, and to build upon it with good works. Not because we're saved by those good works, but our thanksgiving for the gift of salvation. Good works like feeding the poor, housing the poor, helping the destitute, protecting children from rape gangs and pedophiles, which is why Christian men should join the pedophile hunting gangs that are doing the job of the police, because the police won't do them because they're scared of being called racist. It's why churches should support such groups. It's about standing up for our brothers and sisters who are persecuted and enslaved in the Islamic slave markets in Africa and the Middle East. It's about standing up for those Muslims who are enslaved in Dubai and Qatar, where they've had their passports taken from them. It's about standing up, ladies and gentlemen, for marriage and the family as the core identity and the building block of a society. Our good works that Jesus said you will be rewarded for. And so we will receive a reward for our good works. But those of us whose works are poor, those of us who build on the wrong things, we will encounter the purifying fire of the glory of God that sin and bad works cannot enter into. And those works will be burnt up. And we will be saved, but we will be saved like one suffering a loss. And those who have rejected Christ and his free gift of salvation, they will encounter the fires of hell that burn eternally for the demons, the Antichrist, and the beast. Any other questions on any aspect of the Christian faith? Can you shout loud so that sister over there can hear you?
You spoke earlier on how people aged 30 to 18 are leaving Christianity, they don't really understand it. Is it not that perhaps some of the messages within the faith are a bit too complex for people that age? That when they grow older, they may understand it more to a certain degree. And what would you say we could do to combat the youth?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's a good question. The crisis of youth within the church is a real crisis that no one is talking about, because it's taboo to say that we're doing it wrong in our churches. But wisdom is known by her children, or in this case, the lack of wisdom is known by the lack of children. We've got a lack of children and youth in our churches because our discipling of 13 to 18-year-olds is not meeting their requirements. They don't need high intellectual conversation about convoluted doctrines. When you're 13 to 18, what you need is someone to come alongside you and pour in confidence, pour in identity, pour in love, pour in acceptance, confidence in your identity as a Christian. And that is what we are not doing. When we get 13 and 18-year-olds, what we do is we sit them down and we bore them to death with theology. Theology that at that age you're just not interested in. At 13 to 18, you want to belong to a group. You want to explore your body and its abilities. You want to have and cultivate a sense of your own identity. And we need to disciple 13 to 18-year-olds to do that. But also we can learn from the Amish. The Amish church keeps 97% of its youth. Do you hear that? 97% of Amish youth continue in the Amish church. The reason why is because the Amish community alienates the surrounding world. It makes the surrounding world seem strange, alien to the Christian life. And that's what we as Christians must be doing. We must cultivate a Christian way of life that makes us distinct and different and emphasizes how different we are from the non-Christian world. This, incidentally, is how Muslims retain higher numbers of their youth, which is over 50%. They keep over 50% of their youth. Why? Because they alienate the rest of the surrounding culture from Muslim culture. And that's what we need to be doing in our churches. Any questions on any aspect to the Christian faith? I think you had a question.
Yeah, just like back up your point. In one of the Gospels, I think it's Matthew, where the lineage of Christ through Mary is all the way back to King David, all the way back to Abraham.
Yeah.
So that would prove your point right, keeps that man there, that the Jews outmade Alexander.
So whilst I do believe that, as an argument of evidence, it would be limited to the first century. I do believe what the Gospels teach, but in a historical argument, I wouldn't be able to marshal that as an historical argument. All I would be able to do is use the fact that the Gospels reference Jews and Gentiles and Samaritans as proof that in the first century those groups were there. Yeah? But you don't need to do that. Literally, I encourage everybody, go to the British Museum, get yourself on the website, find a Bible tour, and go and do a Bible tour at the British Museum. Just don't go with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Right? Find the Christians that are doing it and go with them. You'll be amazed at the number of artifacts that dovetail with the scripture, thus demonstrating that the Old Testament is something that predates his argument. It's much older. Goes way back. Any other questions?
You're talking about the democratization of information. Right? Do you recommend homeschooling?
Right. So yes, I would recommend homeschooling if you can. I also recognize that not every family is in a position to homeschool. But quite frankly, the education system in the West, in the Anglophile world, has been hijacked by progressive militants who are more interested in indoctrinating your children than educating them. I've literally lived in a house with two teachers who one evening spent an entire evening conspiring how they could punish and make a child think the politically correct thing rather than planning a lesson of education. That, and I overheard them talking about it. Our education system is now about indoctrination. And so, if you can, I would encourage you to homeschool and get involved with homeschooling networks like Classical Education and join networks of families who are homeschooling their children. Don't hand your children over to the state. If you can't homeschool for any reason, whether it be economic or social or whatever, then what you should do is don't teach your children as you used to in the past. Listen to the teacher, right? You should have a conversation with your child what they learned. And obviously they're going to learn good things like mathematics and science and literature and English, and you should help them reinforce those lessons. But the moment something starts to come up on moral issues or ethical issues, you should be willing to contradict the teacher and tell your child that the teacher is wrong. And you must instill in your child confidence in their Christian identity so that your child can go up and say, yes, miss, but as a Christian, we don't believe that. And you should back your child and back the children of any Christian family that is standing up to this political hijacking of the education system. Any other questions on any topic to do with the Christian faith? Yeah. The reason why Muslims in this park always go, I don't get the Trinity, or I just don't think it makes sense, is not because it doesn't make sense to atheists and agnostics and Jews and Zoroastrians and Christians who do get the concept even if they don't believe it. I know atheists that can articulate what the Trinity is better than some Christians. They don't believe it, but they understand the logic of it. So when a Muslim says, oh, it doesn't make sense, they're acting, or they are being deliberately and willfully conceited. But why? It's because the Quran gets it wrong. The Quran gets the Trinity wrong. And because the Quran gets the Trinity wrong, Muslims who have to believe that the Quran is true have to argue that any concept of the Trinity that contradicts the Quran must be wrong. And that's why Muslims insist that we Christians believe in three gods when they can't show that from the Bible, and they can't show that from any council statement, and they can't show that from any catechism. All they can do is assert, oh, you believe in three gods, even though all the evidence says that it isn't. It would literally take you 2 minutes to Google how many gods do Christians believe in. GCSE students can answer that question, but the Muslims in this park can't. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, about any aspect of the Christian faith? Going once?
Should Christians fight for this cause? In talking about vigilantism. For example, if I see someone in Tesco school, should you stop them?
Right.
As an example.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to be clear because of the nature of the question that I am not encouraging vigilantism that goes outside of the law. So everything that I say needs to be heard within the framework of we are going to be following the law of the land. But if you say you love your neighbor, then insofar as you can, you should try to prevent your neighbor from being robbed. If you say you love your neighbor, then you should try to stop your neighbor's children being raped by a Muslim grooming gang. If you say you love your neighbor, then you should fight for all that is right according to the Christian faith, to the fullest extent that the law allows you to. like against abortion. So we are and should fight for a Christian Britain. And thus we should fight for this country to be better by being Christian. But we shouldn't fight for a liberal, secular, humanist democracy. I was going to join the army. But then when the British Armed Forces started bombing Christians in Serbia, I realized that I couldn't join the British Army because that army would be used to support Islamists and kill Christians, like it did in Yugoslavia, like it does in Cyprus, where Britain turned a blind eye to the ethnic cleansing of Cyprus. As a Christian, I can only fight under a Christian government in a Christian army for Christian causes. I cannot fight for a liberal, secular democracy. Though I can use the British Army to teach myself military training, do the minimum amount of service, get military training, and then find a way to use that in the service of the church. Any other questions on any topic to do with the Christian faith?
What do you utilize that training in the UK?
Right. So here's a hypothetical scenario. You join the army, you get military training, and then you set up a Christian mercenary group. Under British law, you can set up mercenary organizations. But you set up these mercenary organizations with the mission that says we will only fight to defend persecuted Christians. And then some government, let's say the Central African Republic, where Islamists are butchering Christians right now, says we will employ the British mercenary group to fight these Islamists. And then the British mercenary group, that is a Christian mercenary group, goes and fights under the Central African government against the Islamists. That's how you would do it. Any other question about any aspect of the Christian faith? While you're thinking, I just want to put in a caveat that if my understanding of British law is incorrect, then add whatever conditions and qualifications are necessary to make my answer correct to British law. Any other questions about any aspect of the Christian faith? Doctrines, beliefs, practices, history, culture, traditions, values, whatever you want to ask.
Lent Fast.
Sorry, yeah, Lent Fast.
Back in the day, it was do you think that should come back?
Right, ladies and gentlemen. The Lenten Fast never disappeared. But unfortunately, huge parts of the Christian church in the West stopped practicing it. Everywhere around the world, they still practice it, except for the West. And that accounts for two reasons. One, because Protestants didn't want to be like Catholics, and so they dropped it. And two, because Catholics in the West relaxed the disciplines around the Lenten Fast, so much so that it became a bit of a joke. The Lenten Fast is not giving up chocolate for Lent, or coffee for Lent. The Lenten Fast, at the bare minimum, is going vegan, hard vegan, for the whole of Lent. At the bare minimum. But you can do more than the bare minimum. And lots of Christians do. It is important for Christians to have common practices because they bind us together as a group. That's exactly why Protestants dropped it, because they didn't want to be bound close to Catholics. But practicing the Lenten Fast allows you to evangelize. Just like when people go, I'll tell you a story. I worked in an office once and Ramadan came around and all the Muslims were fasting for Ramadan, and all my work colleagues who weren't Muslim, weren't Christian, were going, oh, guys, I think it's incredible what you do. Oh, that's so amazing. I wish I could do. Oh, your spirituality is so brilliant. I wish I could do what you do. And then Lent came around, and it came out that I was fasting for Lent. And you know what they were saying to me? The same people, they were saying, don't you know starving yourself hurts you? It's bad for your health. I think it's stupid. So their attitudes change depending on who does it. But the point is, when it came out that I was fasting for Lent, it gave me an opportunity to engage with people about talking about the faith, even though they were more hostile. As Christians, if we fast for Lent, it gives us an opportunity to evangelize. It binds us together as a group, and it gives us a common identity as Christians. So yes, we should rediscover and re-practice the Lenten fast and the Nativity fast, which is fasting for 40 days before Christmas Day. Any other questions on any aspect of the Christian faith?
Following on from what you just said, in the Bible, God appointed certain feasts during the year, and they were directly from God, and so which were obviously to Israel primarily. So do you think that the Bible gives license to create additional appointed times other than those that appear in the scripture?
Right. So I don't know if you heard the question. The question is, does the Bible give us does it give the church authority to create new feasts and new festivals? And the answer to that question is yes. The first reason for that is because unless you're a Jew, you're not bound to the Old Testament feasts and festivals. That's a Jewish calendar, not a Gentile calendar. But Christ gave authority to his church to bind and to loose. What is this binding and loosing? It is this authority to call a fast. If the church wants the church to fast, the church leadership. And in the epistles of Paul says that some people on a one day to the Lord, and some people on another day to the Lord, and some people abstain from some meats, and some people eat everything. Do according to your conscience, so long as you do it to the glory of God. And so the church and the individual has the authority to declare a fast. You as an individual Christian can choose to fast. You as an individual Christian can have a Thanksgiving Day meal. That's what Thanksgiving Day is all about in America. It was a Thanksgiving meal of the Pilgrim Fathers, and it's hard-baked into the American national life, showing that the American national life was founded by Christians and influenced by Christians. So yes, absolutely we can. We are not bound to the Old Testament calendar of feasts and festivals. Any other question on any aspect of the Christian faith?
In a yearly frame,
To the faith?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What actions do they take?
Right. Assuming that they've already been baptized and confirmed, I did actually, you're going to like this, watch these channels, because I did a whole talk about this very question for you. And I go into a lot more detail. But I'll give you some basic minimums. And some basic minimums include the following. 1, pray daily. 2, fast weekly and annually. 3, give as you receive. So if you earn a wage monthly, give monthly, in time or money. Evangelize whenever someone asks of you, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Explain why you're living the Christian life. Study the faith. I mean, studying your Bible. I'm giving you a curriculum of things to study right now. Study the faith. Examine yourself to see if you are actually living out the faith that you are now studying and learning about. So you study prayer and then examine whether you're praying. You study fasting and then examine whether you're fasting. You get the point? Live in community. A Christian should never go a 24-hour period without being in some contact with another Christian. Live in community. If you give your word, if you say you're going, I'm not swearing, if you say you're going to do something, do it. Keep to your word. Your vow is your word. You say you're going to do it, do it. Speak the truth, always. Now, speaking the truth doesn't mean being rude. Doesn't mean always being blunt. You can speak the truth gently. And finally, practice hospitality. Hospitality in the Greek means, it's literally philoxenos, love of the stranger. It is the very opposite of xenophobia, which is fear of the stranger or foreigner, as it can also be translated. Which is why xenophobia is an anathema to the church, and why we should be against xenophobia. But practice hospitality, especially to guests and visitors to your congregations. Obviously, once you've done a gut check that you're going to be safe. I don't advise, per se, that women be hospitable to strange men on their own. But maybe invite a strange man with a bunch of well-known Christians to your house and host them. So practice hospitality. So there's 10 things you can do as a new Christian. Any other questions on any aspect of the Christian faith? Sorry? I've already given this. I've already given an answer to this question. You just have to catch it on video. I've already answered it twice. He can tell you his question. Any other questions about any, and you can tell the answer as practice to see how many you remembered. Okay. Any other question? Well, okay, listen. Any other questions about any aspect of the Christian faith? Going once? Going twice?
Can you be a Christian and vote for Kamala Harris?
Should a Christian vote for Kamala Harris? No. But why? Kamala Harris is pro-abortion. She was pro-abortion up to 9 months. Christians do not support abortion. We consider it murder. And someone who is in favor of murdering little children in their wombs is not anyone a Christian can vote for. Kamala Harris is in favor of LGBT marriage. Marriage is a sacrament for Christians. We believe it is a sacrament between one man and one woman. Someone who is in favor of LGBT marriage, we Christians cannot vote for. The logic of this is that we Christians can't vote for anyone except Christians, which is why we should form Christian political parties, and there are 2 in the UK, the Christian People's Alliance and the Christian Party. Any other questions about any aspect of the Christian faith? Sorry?
Is there any context in which you can vote for someone that is a Christian or doesn't follow the faith?
Right. So if, ladies and gentlemen, you have no chance to vote for a Christian, the first thing you should ask yourself is, am I willing to stand as a Christian? And if the answer to that question is no, and no one else turns up to stand, then you vote for the candidate that embodies the most Christian values you can, or the most Christian the most of the Christian worldview on the ballot sheet. Any other questions on any aspect of the Christian faith?
How would you answer someone who says, going back to the Christian?
Sorry?
Going back to the question about Kamala Harris, how would you answer someone that says, because God gave us free will, to restrict other people's access to abortion is unchristian because it's not?
Yeah. So the problem with the argument that says because we have free will, we should therefore have the right to an abortion is that it is drawing your morality from natural theology. Now, natural theology is Christian in origin. It emerges from a Christian milieu. But we Christians are not meant to draw our theology from natural theology. We're meant to use natural theology to nuance the morality taught in Scripture. And since Scripture says that thou shalt not kill, and since chopping up little babies in their mother's wombs is killing babies, then there is no justification for abortion even through natural law. Because just because I have free will doesn't mean that I can murder any of you. And so it also applies to the unborn child. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm now going to go for a drink with a brother who needs to have a talk. I hope you have a lovely evening, a lovely afternoon, and a very safe stay in Speaker's Corner. Good night, God bless.